The rain against the studio window sounds like applause. Ironic, considering the silence that followed my presentation 3 years ago. I can still see his face, Takeshi Yamamoto, sitting in the back row of the lecture hall, arms crossed, that smirk playing at the corners of his mouth like he knew something I didn't. I was 22 then, standing before a panel of professors and industry professionals, clutching my portfolio of fashion designs like they were fragments of my soul. Because they were. Every sketch, every fabric swatch, every carefully rendered illustration represented nights I'd spent hunched over my desk instead of sleeping, coffee-stained dreams instead of dates, ambition instead of a social life. Fashion is about emotion, I remember saying, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound confident. It's about telling stories through fabric, creating wearable poetry that speaks to the human condition. My collection explores the duality of strength and vulnerability. That's when I heard it. A snort of laughter from the back row. Barely audible. But in the pin-drop silence of the presentation room, it might as well have been a gunshot. My words died in my throat. The professors shifted uncomfortably, and Takeshi beautiful. Brilliant Takeshi with his designer clothes. And trust fund confidence covered his mouth with his hand. But his eyes were dancing with amusement. Wearable poetry? He whispered to his friend, just loud enough for me to hear. More like wearable delusion. I finished my presentation somehow, stumbling through explanations of construction techniques and market analysis, while my cheeks burned with humiliation. But the damage was done. The magic I'd felt just moments before, the certainty that I was sharing something meaningful, had evaporated like morning mist. The panel's feedback was polite, but lukewarm. Interesting concepts, Miyuki, but perhaps a bit too conceptual for practical application. They recommended I consider more commercial approaches, more mainstream appeal. I should have been devastated by their rejection. Instead, I was consumed by the memory of that laugh, that dismissive, casual cruelty from someone who had never struggled for anything in his life. Takeshi Yamamoto, son of a textile empire, born into the very industry I was fighting to enter. He'd been in my advanced design theory class, always immaculately dressed, always contributing insights that came not from study, but from growing up surrounded by fabric samples and fashion magazines. While I worked 3 part-time jobs to afford art supplies, he casually mentioned trips to Milan Fashion Week as if they were weekend getaways. I'd admired him once. More than admired, I'd harbored a secret, painful crush that made me hyper-aware of his presence in every class we shared. I noticed the way he rolled up his sleeves when he sketched, revealing expensive watches and perfectly pressed cuffs. The way he spoke with such casual authority about techniques and designers, as if the fashion world was his personal playground. But that day, watching him mock my deepest aspiration, with such careless cruelty, something crystallized inside me, cold and sharp and unforgiving. 3 years later, I stand in my own studio, surrounded by evidence of everything he said I'd never achieve. The walls are lined with sketches and fabric samples from my upcoming collection, not wearable delusion, but wearable revolution. My designs have evolved, sharpened by necessity and spite into something more dangerous than pretty clothes. The fashion industry, I learned, isn't just about creativity. It's about understanding power. Who has it, who wants it, and how to manipulate both. And right now, I'm holding all the cards. My phone buzzes with a text from my assistant. Yamamoto confirmed for tomorrow's meeting. 2 p.m. perfect. The irony isn't lost on me that the same rain falling now was falling the night I made my decision. 6 months ago, hunched over my laptop in this same studio, I'd been researching freelance designers for my marketing campaign when his name appeared in my search results. Takeshi Yamamoto. Freelance creative director, former fashion student turned marketing strategist, available for hire. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. His portfolio was impressive. I'll give him that. Clean, sophisticated campaigns for mid-tier fashion brands. Nothing groundbreaking, but competent, professional, exactly the kind of safe, commercial work the professors had pushed me toward 3 years ago. But what caught my attention wasn't his work, it was his client list. Or rather, what it revealed about his current situation. No major brands, no luxury partnerships, just a string of smaller companies. The kind that hire freelancers because they can't afford established agencies. The golden boy had fallen from grace. A few discreet inquiries through industry contacts revealed the story. Takeshi had started at his father's company after graduation, fast-tracked into a senior position that should have taken years to earn. But nepotism, as it turns out, doesn't compensate for actual talent. A series of failed campaigns and strategic missteps had damaged his reputation. His father, embarrassed by his son's public failures, had quietly suggested he strike out on his own. Translation: he'd been fired from his own family's company. Now he was struggling to build a freelance career, competing with dozens of other creative directors who had earned their positions through merit rather than birthright. The fashion world, for all its glamour, is surprisingly small. Word travels fast about who's rising and who's falling. And Takeshi Yamamoto was definitely falling, which is exactly why I'm going to catch him. The studio door chimes as my assistant, Yuki, enters with our usual evening coffee. She's been with me since the beginning. One of the few people who knows the full scope of what I'm building here. Loyal, intelligent, and possessed of a moral flexibility that makes her invaluable in situations like this. Everything's set for tomorrow, she reports, setting down my cup. He thinks it's a straightforward campaign consultation. Fashion startup looking for brand identity work. Did he ask about budget? I mentioned mid-six figures. His response time improved considerably after that. Of course it did. Desperation has a way of sharpening focus. I sip my coffee and study the mood board on my wall, a carefully curated collection of images that represent the aesthetic of my upcoming collection. Dark romanticism meets modern minimalism. Beauty with teeth. Softness that can cut. Are you sure about this, Miyuki? Yuki's voice carries a note of concern. What you're planning? It's elaborate. Maybe to elaborate. I turn to face her, and she takes a step back. I've been told my smile can be unsettling when I'm truly pleased about something. Elaborate is the point. I say, anyone can fire someone. Anyone can ruin a career with a bad review or a whisper campaign. That's amateur hour. What I'm doing is art. She doesn't look convinced, but she nods anyway. Yuki understands that once I set my mind to something, discussion becomes academic. The truth is, destroying Takeshi would be easy, too easy. Where's the satisfaction in watching someone fall when they're already on their knees? No. What I want is more complex, more poetic. I want him to climb back up, thinking he's been saved. I want him to believe in his redemption, his comeback, his second chance. I want him to pour his heart and soul into work that will define his career resurrection. And then I want him to realize that his savior and his destroyer are the same person. The meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m., but I arrive at the office an hour early to prepare. Not my studio, that would be too intimate, too revealing. Instead, I've rented a sleek conference room in a high-end business building in Shibuya, the kind of place where serious money makes serious decisions. I've chosen my outfit carefully. A black blazer from my own upcoming collection, perfectly tailored to suggest both success and restraint. My hair is pulled back in a severe chignon that emphasizes the sharp angles of my face. No jewelry except for a single pair of pearl earrings, expensive enough to signal wealth, classic enough to avoid looking flashy. I want to look like money, old money, the kind of client every struggling freelancer dreams of landing at exactly 2 p.m. He arrives. 3 years have changed him. The casual confidence is still there, but it's more studied now, more deliberate. His clothes are still expensive, But I notice the way he unconsciously adjusts his cufflinks, a nervous habit he didn't used to have. Success, real success, doesn't fidget. Ms. Tanaka, he says, extending his hand with a smile that's probably practiced in the mirror. Thank you for considering me for this project. Double quotes Ms. Tanaka. My mother's maiden name, carefully chosen for this charade. I've had months to construct this alternate identity of fashion startup founder, with venture capital backing and ambitious plans for market disruption. The kind of client story that sounds exactly plausible enough to be believed without being questioned too deeply. Mr. Yamamoto, I reply, shaking his hand briefly. Please sit. He doesn't recognize me. Why would he? 3 years ago, I was just another struggling student, invisible except as a target for casual cruelty. Now I'm a potential paycheck, which means I've transcended into the realm of people worth remembering. For the next hour, I watch him perform. He's good, I'll admit. Charming without being smarmy. Confident without being arrogant. He asks intelligent questions about my brand vision, my target demographic, my competitive positioning. He nods thoughtfully at my answers, occasionally making notes on an expensive tablet that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I tell him about my fashion line keeping close enough to the truth to sound authentic while omitting any details that might trigger recognition. I describe my aesthetic vision, clothing that tells stories. That speaks to the duality of human nature. That bridges the gap between strength and vulnerability. I watch his face carefully as I speak, looking for any flicker of recognition, any memory of those words spoken in a different context 3 years ago. But there's nothing. Just professional interest and carefully modulated enthusiasm. This sounds like exactly the kind of project I love to work on, he says, leaning forward slightly. Fashion with substance. Clothing that means something. The irony is so perfect it almost makes me laugh. Almost. I have to ask, I say, keeping my voice neutral. What's your opinion on fashion as artistic expression? Do you think there's value in conceptual design? Or should commercial viability always be the primary concern? He considers this seriously, steepling his fingers in a gesture I remember from our university classes. I think the best. Fashion manages to be both, he says finally, artistically meaningful but commercially viable. The designers who succeed long-term are the ones who can translate their vision into something people actually want to wear and buy. A diplomatic answer. Safe? Exactly what I'd expect from someone who's learned to avoid taking strong positions. That might alienate potential clients. Interesting. I murmur. Have you ever encountered designers who were too focused on the artistic side, too conceptual? Something flickers across his face, then a micro-expression that might be embarrassment or discomfort. Early in my career, yes, he admits, I probably wasn't as diplomatic as I should have been about it. Young and stupid, you know. I've learned to appreciate different approaches since then. Young and stupid. Is that how he thinks of it? A youthful indiscretion rather than casual cruelty? The reduction of my humiliation to a learning experience for his character development? We all make mistakes when we're young. I say smoothly. The important thing is growing from them. He nods eagerly, clearly relieved that I'm not pressing the point. The rest of the meeting proceeds smoothly. We discuss timelines, deliverables, budget. I watch him light up when I mention the compensation more than he's probably made on his last 3 projects combined. Enough to solve whatever financial pressures he's currently facing, and then some. I have to be honest, he says as we wrap up. This is exactly the kind of opportunity I've been hoping for. A chance to work on something meaningful with a client who really understands fashion as art. I believe in giving talented people the platform they deserve. I reply, everyone should have the chance to prove what they're really capable of. We shake hands again, and this time his grip lingers just a moment longer than purely professional. There's something in his eyes, gratitude, maybe, or relief. The look of someone who's been thrown a lifeline just when the water was getting too deep. I won't let you down, he promises. I'm counting on it, I say, after he leaves. I sit alone in the conference room for a long time, watching the traffic flow through the streets below. Shibuya at rush hour is a river of ambition and desperation. Everyone rushing toward their own version of success or running from their own version of failure. Takeshi is walking among them now, probably already, planning how he'll spend his newfound windfall, already envisioning his triumphant return to relevance. He has no idea that he's not walking toward salvation, he's walking deeper into a web. That's been 3 years in the weaving. The campaign I've hired him to create is real. Every detail I've shared about my fashion line, every brand positioning, statement, and target demographic analysis is meticulously researched and carefully planned. This isn't some elaborate fake project designed to waste his time. That would be amateur art. No. I'm going to let him create something brilliant. I'm going to give him every resource he needs to craft the kind of campaign that could define a career. I'm going to watch him pour his talent and creativity and desperate hope into work that showcases everything he's capable of. And then, when he's finished, when he's delivered something he's truly proud of, something that represents his artistic vision at its peak, I'm going to reveal exactly who his mystery client really is. The girl whose dreams he mocked. The wearable delusion he dismissed with a laugh. I wonder if he'll remember that presentation then. If he'll realize that the conceptual designer he once ridiculed is now the one signing his checks. If he'll understand that his professional resurrection has been orchestrated by the very person he tried to bury. But that revelation is still weeks away. First, I need to let him work. Let him believe. Let him hope. After all, the higher you climb, the farther you fall. Over the next month, I watched Takeshi transform. The change is subtle at first, a new energy in his emails, a confidence in his voice during our check-in calls. But as the project progresses, as he begins to see the scope and potential of what we're building together, something shifts. He's not just working for me anymore. He's working for himself, for his redemption. I've been thinking about your brand essence, he says during one of our video conferences. Behind him, I can see his home office, neat, minimalist, with mood boards covering one wall like a shrine to creative process. Fashion as emotional storytelling. It's not just about selling clothes. It's about selling identity, transformation. I nod encouragingly from my side of the screen, where I appear as Ms. Tanaka in a different, carefully selected outfit. Go on. The tagline I keep coming back to is "Wear your truth." The idea that your clothing choices are declarations of identity. That fashion is just authenticity made visible. Wear your truth. It's actually quite good. Better than I expected, if I'm being honest. There's a sincerity to it that suggests he's not just going through professional motions, he's genuinely invested in this vision. I love it, I tell him, and I'm surprised to realize I mean it. How do you see that translating visually? He leans forward, animated in a way I haven't seen since our university days. Duality. Everything in pairs or contrasts. Strength and softness. Light and shadow. Public face and private truth. The campaign imagery would play with these tensions. As he talks, gesturing toward his mood boards, I find myself drawn into his vision despite myself. This is the Takeshi I remember from school, the one whose insights in design theory class were genuinely brilliant, whose creativity seemed effortless, before the family pressure and professional failures wore him down, into someone desperate enough to take consulting calls from mysterious clients. What about the launch event? I ask. How do we make this more than just another fashion show? His eyes light up. Not a show, an experience. We transform the venue into a journey through different emotional states. Each room represents a different aspect of truth, the lies we tell ourselves, the masks we wear, the moments when we finally drop our guard. It's elaborate, expensive, Exactly the kind of concept that fashion editors and influencers will either love or hate, with no middle ground. It's also exactly the kind of risk-taking creative vision that his previous clients probably wouldn't have been brave enough to approve. The budget for something like that, he starts to say, then stops himself, is not a concern. I finish. I told you, Mr. Yamamoto, I believe in doing things properly. After the call ends, I sit in my studio staring at my reflection in the darkened window. Outside, Tokyo glitters with a million lights, each one representing someone's ambition, someone's dream, someone's struggle to matter in a world that would rather they disappear. 3 years ago, I was just another struggling student with delusions of grandeur. Now I'm the mysterious benefactor behind what's shaping up to be one of the most talked about fashion launches of the season. The girl whose dreams were mocked is about to make those dreams reality using the creative vision of the very person who tried to crush them. There's poetry in that. Dark poetry, but poetry nonetheless. YUK, I finds me there an hour later, still staring out at the city. The venue contracts came through, she reports. We have the Mori Art Museum for the launch event. 3 days, full creative control. The Mori Art Museum in Roppongi Hills, overlooking the entire city. It's perfect, prestigious enough to attract attention, artistic enough to match Takeshi's ambitious concept. He's going to do something special with this, isn't he? Yuki observes, settling into the chair across from my desk. Yes, I admit. He is. Are you having second thoughts? Am I? The question catches me off guard. For 3 years, my plan has been crystal clear. Let him mock my dreams, then force him to make them reality without knowing it. Watch him pour his heart into work that will ultimately serve as evidence of his own cruel irony. But watching him work these past weeks, seeing his genuine excitement and creative passion, something has begun to shift. This isn't the callous, privileged boy who laughed at my presentation. This is someone who's been humbled, who's learned what it means to struggle, who's grateful for a second chance. No, I tell Yuki, and I almost believe it. No second thoughts. The launch event is 3 weeks away when everything changes. I'm in my studio, reviewing fabric samples for the final pieces in my collection, when my phone rings. A known number, but I answer anyway. Ms. Tanaka? The voice is unfamiliar, professional. This is Kenji Nakamura from Fashion Week Tokyo. I'm calling about your upcoming launch event. My blood goes cold. Fashion Week Tokyo has nothing to do with my launch. I've deliberately scheduled it as an independent event to avoid any official Fashion Week politics. I think there might be some confusion. I start to say, no confusion. He interrupts. We've been following the buzz around your brand, and we'd like to invite you to participate in next season's official schedule. The creative concept your team has developed is exactly the kind of innovation we want to showcase. Buzz. What buzz? The launch hasn't happened yet. The only people who know about the concept are myself, Yuki, and how did you hear about our concept? I ask carefully. Your creative director, Takeshi Yamamoto, reached out to us directly. He thought we should know about the project, given its potential impact. He was quite passionate about it, actually. Said it represented a new evolution in fashion as experiential art. The phone feels suddenly heavy in my hand. Takeshi contacted Fashion Week Tokyo, behind my back, without permission. I see. I manage. And what exactly did he tell you? Everything. The brand positioning, the launch concept, the venue transformation. He even shared some of the preliminary campaign imagery. Quite impressive work. After I hang up, I sit in the growing darkness of my studio, trying to process what I've just learned. Takeshi has taken my project, the campaign I hired him to create, the vision we developed together, and shopped it around the fashion industry as his own work. Not exactly his own work, but close enough. He's positioning himself as the creative mastermind behind an innovative new brand. conveniently omitting the fact that he's a hired contractor rather than a business partner. It's a smart move, professionally speaking. If the launch is successful, he gets to claim credit for discovering and developing a hot new talent. If it fails, he's just a consultant who did his best with difficult material. Either way, he wins. The betrayal hits me like a physical blow, not because I trusted him I didn't, but because for the past month, I'd allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had changed. That the arrogant boy who mocked my dreams had grown into someone capable of genuine collaboration and respect. Instead, he's the same person he always was, taking credit for other people's vision, using his connections and privilege to elevate himself at others' expense. The only difference is that this time, I'm not a powerless student. This time, I have resources. This time, I can do something about it. I call Yuki first, filling her in on the Fashion Week Tokyo situation. Her reaction is immediate and violent. That bastard, she hisses. After everything you've done for him, the budget, the creative freedom, the chance to rebuild his reputation. It's fine, I interrupt, though my voice sounds strange even to my own ears. Actually, it's perfect. Perfect, Miyuki. He's trying to steal your project. He's not trying to steal it. He's trying to position himself as essential to it, which means he's just made himself indispensable to its success. There's a long pause. When Yuki speaks again, her voice is careful. What are you thinking? I tell her. When I finish explaining, the silence stretches so long I wonder if the call has dropped. Jesus Christ, Miyuki, she whispers finally. That's beautiful and absolutely ruthless. He wants to take credit for my success. Fine. Let him tie his professional reputation to this launch as tightly as possible. Let him tell everyone who will listen that this is his creative vision, his comeback project, his path to redemption. And then, at the launch event, in front of everyone who matters in the fashion industry, I reveal who I really am. I tell the story of a struggling student whose dreams were mocked by a privileged boy who thought her work was wearable delusion. I explain how that same boy, years later, unknowingly poured his heart into making those dreams reality. The press will eat it alive, Yuki murmurs. The press will eat him alive. The narrative writes itself. Arrogant fashion scion mocks struggling artist, then gets hired by same artist to create her comeback campaign. The irony is too perfect, too poetic. It'll be the story everyone's talking about for months. And his career? I consider this. In the fashion industry, perception is reality. Image is everything. A story like this, properly told, doesn't just damage a reputation, it destroys it completely. No one wants to work with someone who represents hubris and hypocrisy on such a public scale. His career will be over. I say simply, not just damaged, finished. The fashion world has a long memory for this kind of story. Are you sure you want to do this? It's not just professional destruction we're talking about. It's personal annihilation. Am I sure? 3 years ago, his casual cruelty had been a moment of thoughtless privilege. What he's doing now is calculated betrayal. The struggling consultant I'd felt sympathy for doesn't exist. He's just another mask worn by the same entitled person who thinks other people's dreams are fair targets for mockery. I'm sure, I tell her. The next 2 weeks pass in a blur of final preparations. Takeshi, unaware that I know about his Fashion Week Tokyo gambit, continues to work with impressive dedication. His campaign materials are genuinely excellent, sophisticated, emotionally resonant, perfectly calibrated to generate both critical acclaim and commercial interest. Under different circumstances, I might have been proud to work with him. Instead, I watch him build the scaffolding for his own destruction with something approaching admiration. He's thorough. I'll give him that. Every detail of the launch event is meticulously planned. Every element of the campaign carefully crafted to maximize impact. He's even started reaching out to fashion journalists, teasing them with hints about an innovative new brand that's about to shake up the industry, building anticipation, creating buzz, making sure that when the story breaks, there will be maximum audience for his humiliation. 2 days before the launch, we have our final planning meeting. We're supposed to go over last-minute logistics, confirm vendor arrangements, review the guest list one final time. Instead, I decide to give him a chance to come clean. I've been getting some interesting calls, I mentioned casually, scrolling through my phone. Fashion journalists asking about the launch. Apparently, word is getting around about the event concept. I watch his face carefully. He doesn't flinch, but there's a slight tightening around his eyes. That's great, he says. Buzz is exactly what we want at this stage. Pre-event anticipation can really amplify the impact. Any idea how they might have heard about it? We've been keeping things fairly quiet. This time he does hesitate, just for a moment. Well, I may have mentioned it to a few contacts, just to gauge industry interest. I hope that's okay, a few contacts. Such a casual way to describe what amounts to a publicity campaign, designed to position himself as the creative force behind the project. Of course, I say, I appreciate your enthusiasm for the project. It's easy to be enthusiastic about something this special, he replies, and his smile seems genuine. This launch is going to change everything for both of us. For both of us. As if we're partners rather than consultant and client. As if his contribution gives him a claim to ownership of my vision. Yes, I agree. I think you're right about that. The night before the launch, I stand alone in the transformed Mori Art Museum, surveying what Takeshi and his team have created. The space has been divided into 5 interconnected rooms, each one exploring a different theme. Masks we wear, lies we tell, truths we hide, moments we break, and finally, selves we become. It's breathtaking. More than that, it's genuinely artistic. The kind of immersive experience that fashion critics will dissect for months, looking for deeper meaning in every design choice. The irony isn't lost on me that the most honest artistic work of Takeshi's career has been built on a foundation of deception, his own deception. But still, tomorrow, this space will be filled with fashion editors, influencers, photographers, and industry executives. They'll move through these rooms, experiencing the journey from artifice to authenticity that Takeshi has crafted with such care. And at the end of that journey, in the final room dedicated to becoming our true selves, I'll tell them exactly who I am. The launch event begins at 7 p.m. By 6:30, the museum is buzzing with anticipation. I watch from the security office as guests begin to arrive, fashion's most influential voices, all here to witness what they believe will be the emergence of an exciting new brand. Takeshi is in the main entrance, greeting rivals with the confidence of someone who knows he's about to triumph. He's dressed impeccably, radiating the kind of professional charm that made him successful before his fall from grace. Tonight, he's betting everything on a comeback. I'm betting on his destruction. At exactly 7 p.m., I make my entrance. I've chosen my outfit with the same care I once put into that university presentation 3 years ago, a dress from my own collection. The centerpiece that represents everything I've learned about fashion as emotional expression. It's black silk with subtle architectural details, elegant, but with an edge that suggests danger. I look successful, confident, like someone who belongs in this world. The guests move through the exhibition in small groups, and I watch them discover each room, hear their murmurs of appreciation and surprise. Takeshi has exceeded even my expectations. This isn't just a fashion launch, it's an artistic statement, which makes what I'm about to do even more devastating. I position myself in the final room, the one dedicated to becoming our authentic selves. The space is designed like a mirror, maze, with carefully placed lighting that creates the illusion of infinite reflections. At the center is a simple platform where I'll present the collection and, more importantly, tell my story. By 8:30, most of the guests have made their way through the earlier rooms and gather here for the main presentation. I can see fashion. Journalists with their phones ready, photographers positioning themselves for the perfect shot, influencers already crafting their social media posts. Takeshi stands near the back, beaming with pride and anticipation. Good evening. I begin, and the room falls silent. Thank you all for joining me tonight to celebrate the launch of my fashion line. Before I show you the collection, I'd like to tell you a story. I can see confusion rippling through the crowd. They're expecting a typical designer speech inspirations, influences, artistic vision, not a story. 3 years ago, I was a struggling fashion student with big dreams and bigger aspiration. I believed that fashion could be art, that clothing could tell stories, that there was space in this industry for wearable poetry. A few people shift uncomfortably. This isn't the tone they expected. I presented my senior collection to a panel of professors and industry professionals, convinced that my conceptual approach would be appreciated by people who understood fashion as emotional expression. I pause, letting my gaze sweep across the room until it lands on Takeshi. He's frowning now, something nagging at the edge of his consciousness. There was someone in the audience that day, someone who found my presentation amusing, who thought my dreams were worth mocking, who whispered to his friend that my work was wearable delusion. The realization hits Takeshi like a physical blow. I watch the color drain from his face as he finally recognizes me. Not Ms. Tanaka, the mysterious client with unlimited budget and artistic vision. Miyuki Sato, the struggling student whose dreams he dismissed with a laugh. That moment changed everything for me. I continue, my voice carrying clearly through. The sudden tension in the room, not because it crushed my dreams, but because it clarified them. I realized that in fashion, as in life, power matters more than talent. Perception matters more than truth. And sometimes, the best revenge is letting your enemies destroy themselves. Several journalists are already typing frantically on their phones. They can sense a story developing, something more dramatic than a typical fashion launch. The person who mocked my dreams 3 years ago is here tonight. In fact, he's the creative director responsible for this beautiful exhibition you've just experienced. He poured his heart and soul into creating this campaign, thinking he was working for a successful new designer named Ms. Tanaka. I turn to face Takeshi directly. He looks like he's going to be sick. But Ms. Tanaka doesn't exist. She's just another costume, another role I've learned to play. My real name is Miyuki Sato, and I'm the girl whose wearable delusions he found so amusing. The silence in the room is absolute. I can hear the software of cameras, the scratch of pens on paper, the sharp intake of breath from guests who are beginning to understand the magnitude of what they're witnessing. I hired him. I say simply, I hired the person who mocked my dreams to make them reality. I paid him handsomely to create a campaign celebrating the very vision he once dismissed. And he did beautiful work, didn't you, Takeshi? All eyes turned to him. He's standing frozen, his face a mask of horror and disbelief. This is the moment every nightmare is made of: total, public, inescapable humiliation. The irony, I continue, is that he never stopped believing in his own superiority. Even while working for me, even while bringing my artistic vision to life, he was telling people in the industry that this was his project, his creative discovery, his comeback story. A murmur runs through the crowd. The fashion world is small, and several people here have probably heard Takeshi's version of events. So tonight, in this room dedicated to becoming our authentic selves, I thought it was time for everyone to know the truth. The beautiful exhibition you've experienced, the artistic vision you've admired, it all came from the mind of someone whose dreams were once considered worthless. Created by someone who learned that the best way to prove your worth isn't to seek approval, but to make approval irrelevant. I gestured to the racks of clothing that lined the room, my collection, the wearable poetry that started this whole journey. This is what wearable delusion looks like when it's given the resources to flourish. This is what happens when you let a dreamer dream. instead of mocking them for believing in something beautiful. The presentation that follows is almost anticlimactic. The clothes speak for themselves: innovative, emotionally resonant, technically excellent. The kind of work that establishes careers and defines movements. But everyone in the room knows that the real story isn't the fashion. It's the psychology. The 3-year journey from humiliation to triumph. Orchestrated with surgical precision by someone who understood that the cruelest revenge is making your enemy complicit in their own destruction. As guests mingle afterward, I watch Takeshi slip away toward the exit. He doesn't say goodbye, doesn't try to explain or defend himself. What could he possibly say? Several journalists approach me for follow-up interviews, already crafting headlines in their minds. Fashion, students' ultimate revenge, the 3-year con that fooled an industry. When dreams get their due, the fashion world will dissect every detail, not just of the collection, but of the drama that unfolded tonight. Social media will amplify it, turning Takeshi's name into a cautionary tale, and mine into a legend. The irony is that this was never just about revenge. It was about proving something to myself, that my dreams weren't delusions, that they were worth fighting for. As the last guests filter out of the Mori Art Museum, Yuki finds me in the mirrored room, standing among the reflections of my collection. The lights are dim now, the space quiet except for the faint hum of the city beyond the windows. "You did it," she says, her voice soft but carrying a weight of admiration. "That was unforgettable." I nod, my gaze lingering on a dress, suspended in the center of the room, black silk with jagged seams, a visual representation of strength stitched from vulnerability. It was necessary. She hesitates, then asks, "Do you feel satisfied?" The question catches me off guard. Satisfied. I've spent 3 years planning this moment, weaving a web so intricate that Takeshi never saw the trap until it snapped shut. I humiliated him in front of the industry he thought he owned, turned his ambition into the instrument of his downfall. By morning, his name will be synonymous with failure, while mine will be celebrated as a triumph of resilience and cunning. But satisfaction, that's more complicated. I feel finished. I say finally. This chapter is done. Yuki tilts her head, studying me. And the next one, I smile. But it's not the unsettling smile she's used to. It's quieter, softer, like the rain that started falling again outside. The next one is about creation. No more games, no more revenge. Just the work, the art. She nods, understanding. You're going to be unstoppable, you know. That I've always been unstoppable. I reply, and for the first time in years, I believe it without reservation. Takeshi just helped me remember. The next morning, my phone is a war zone of notifications. Articles are already Live Vogue Japan, WWD, local fashion blogs, even international outlets picking up the story. Headlines scream variations of the same theme. Designers' revenge steals the show. At Tokyo launch, from mock to mastermind. Miyuki Sato's triumph, the fall of a fashion scion. X is ablaze with reactions. Some calling me a genius, others a villain, but all agreeing on one thing. Last night was historic. I scrolled through a few posts, noting the mix of awe and outrage. One user writes, "Miyuki Sato didn't just launch a collection, she launched a legacy." Hashtag wear your truth. Double quotes another. Less charitable says, "This is what happens when you mix talent with spite. Takeshi Yamamoto deserved it. But damn, that was cold." I don't linger on the noise. The fashion world thrives on drama, but drama fades. The work endures. By noon, I'm back in my studio, sketching new designs. The collection that launched last night was just the beginning. A statement of intent. But there's more to say. More stories to tell through fabric and form. I've secured meetings with 2 major retailers next week. And Fashion Week Tokyo's official invitation for next season is sitting in my inbox, waiting for my response. Yuk arrives with coffee and a stack of printed articles. "You're trending," she says, tossing the papers onto my desk. And I mean trending. They're calling you the poet of petty on X. I laugh. A real laugh. The kind I haven't allowed myself in years. Poet of petty. I can live with that. She hesitates, then pulls out her phone. There's something else. Takeshi posted this morning. I raise an eyebrow. Posted what? She hands me her phone, and I read the post on X. Takeshi_Yamamoto. Last night was a humbling experience. I made mistakes years ago, and more recently. I underestimated someone's vision and overestimated my own importance. Miyuki Sato's work speaks for itself, and I'm grateful to have been part of it, even if I didn't deserve to be. Wishing her success. #wear your truth, it's single quotes as unexpected. Not an apology, exactly, but close. A public acknowledgement of his role, his errors. I wonder if it's damage control or something more genuine. Either way, it doesn't change what happened or what's coming for him. The industry won't forget, and forgiveness is a currency it rarely trades in. I hand the phone back to Yuki. Let him post. It doesn't matter anymore. She nods, but there's a question in her eyes. You're really done with him, aren't you? I was done with him the moment I stepped onto that platform last night. I say, he was a means to an end. Now the end is here, and I'm ready for what's next. Over the next few weeks, the buzz around my launch only grows. Orders pour in from boutiques across Asia, and a European distributor reaches out with a proposal for international expansion. My collection is featured in editorials, praised for its emotional depth and technical precision. The narrative of my revenge becomes a footnote, a spicy anecdote that adds intrigue to my brand but doesn't define Takeshi. Meanwhile, fades from view, his freelance contracts dry up, and his name disappears from industry conversations. I hear through a mutual contact that he's left Tokyo, possibly to work for a small agency in Osaka, far from the spotlight he once craved. I don't feel joy at this, nor do I feel guilt. I feel nothing. He's a shadow that no longer casts, a shape on my life dot in the quiet moments. When I'm alone in my studio with only my sketches and the hum of the city outside, I think about that girl from 3 years ago, the one who stood trembling in a lecture hall, clutching her portfolio like a lifeline, her dreams so fragile they could be shattered by a single laugh. I wish I could tell her that she was enough, even then, that her work was worthy, even if it wasn't perfect, that the world would one day see her as she saw herself. But I don't need to tell her. She already knows. I pin a new sketch to my mood board of flowing gown with sharp, asymmetrical lines, a garment that feels like both armor and surrender. It's the first piece in my next collection, one that will owe nothing to revenge or spite, or the need to prove anything to anyone. This time, it's just for me. The rain is falling again, soft against the studio windows. But tonight, it doesn't sound like applause. It sounds like possibility.